September 7th Committee of the Whole meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. Ms. Wagner, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Bolton. Mr. Craig.
Here.
Ms. Jones. Mr. Morosky.
Here.
Mrs. Weinberg. Dr. Moffitt.
Here.
President Lindy.
Here. Thanks everyone for being here this afternoon. I have just a couple of preliminaries as we get started, and then we'll move into our presentations. The first is, this is our first Committee of the Whole meeting since the committee chairs met and recommended a new committee structure to our school board, which we adopted at the August 15th board meeting. So this is the first Committee of the Whole that's happened since then. And just to remind everybody who is here or anybody who is watching what that means, we are shifting the work that had been in our Student Achievement Committee to our Committee of the Whole meetings for a number of reasons that I think make great sense. And so what you should expect to see in both in this Committee of the Whole and in future committees of the whole is a real focus on student outcomes and student achievement. We're going to be talking today about graduation requirements, among some other topics. And then I think I'm going to do everything I can to keep these meetings between 4 and 5:30, because we did add to the amount that we're going to try to cover in these meetings. There may be some that go until 6, but I'm going to do everything I can to keep them from 4 until 5:30. So that was preliminary comment number 1. Preliminary comment number 2 is just the next item on the agenda tonight is our 3-month board priorities. This is also the first time we've had a full board meeting since we adopted these items on August 15th. I will just read them very briefly. Anybody who has our hard copy agenda has the short version on the front and the longer version on the back. But between now and the 8th of November, there are 5 areas where our board is trying to take some important steps forward. First is next steps on our governance coaching work. Second is clarifying and adopting a strategic planning process. Third, which we're talking about tonight, is transportation. Fourth, doing everything we can for a successful passage of our renewal levy. And then fifth, continuing to strengthen community relationships and parent engagement. And we have a number of events on tap for that 5th priority. So the challenge that I think we're offering to each other is to make sure we're spending at least majority plus 1 minute of our time on the things we said are most important. We did that last time. I think we can do that this time. Any other preliminaries from board members before we get into our first presentation? All right. So I think we're ready for our transportation update. I'm not entirely sure where our presenter is. I think we will pause for a moment and pick up as soon as we have our presenter ready to go.
Since we have people online, we do have a financial town hall tomorrow.
Here you go. Let's plug the town hall.
Yeah, Jen and Dr. K, we are going to be rocking it, talking about your ESSER questions. So I'm excited. I've had people ask me, hey, they reposted it. We're doing good. I said, this is all Jen, the Jen show. This is Ask Jen. Just ask Jen. Just ask Jen.
I love it. I love it.
So 6 o'clock tomorrow here in the ILC, and we're going to be just asking and answering questions about ESSER funding. Huh? Yeah. Maybe we'll get Mike to do a set. Yeah, I was going to say, you want to do a set? You know, do you remember the Wayans brothers in Living Color when they had this set that wrote a song about it, like to hear it, here it go.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm just grateful there are people watching this meeting while we talk about In Living Color. We could reminisce. We could get up and dance like the Fly Girls.
Yeah, we could.
I'm not sure this is the
I
best
knew
use
he
of
wasn't going to let
taxpayer
it go on.
dollars,
Yep.
friends.
Hey, Bob, do we have anybody that wants to say something?
Well, we do have as we wait for our superintendent, we do have a section at the end on other Q&A. I don't know if anybody has any Q&A that could involve our treasurer or each other. If you do, we could certainly try to tackle some of this. Yeah, it may be that nobody has anything,
It's
and that's
just
okay.
a time filler.
All right. Well, welcome. Great. So thrilled to have, I think, our group with us today. And we are going to pick up with our first presentation, which is a transportation update.
Understatement. All right, good afternoon. Rob, I'll make sure that you have this to illuminate. Okay. Okay, want to start the overview of where we are currently in transportation, with really starting with a update of the Ohio law that applies to transportation. One of the things to note is that our students that live more than 2 miles from the school in kindergarten through 8th grade are required to have transportation. For this transportation, for the transportation guidance, I also would like to note that students are allowed to walk at least a half mile to their bus stop. So the state law is for kindergarten through 8th grade students that live more than 2 miles from their school. Currently, as a district, our district provides transportation services outside of what the Ohio law provides. So for transportation, for our eligible students, we provide transportation for all students that live in our school's attendance boundaries. So that's for schools in our district and our non-public schools, which include our charters and parochial schools. While for state law, it's only required that transportation is provided for kindergarten through 8th grade students that live at least 2 miles or more away from their school, we provide transportation for students in kindergarten through 12th grade. And this current year, we increased that transportation from 1.25 miles away from their school to 1 mile away from their school. So for our kindergarten students, K through 6, it's 1 mile away. Previously, or last year, it was 1.25 miles. And for our 7th through 12th grade students, it's 1 mile away. And both of those were updated as of May 2022. Current staffing for our transportation department, we have a director, coordinator, a routing and planning coordinator, a senior accounting technician. We have 4 transportation specialists. One of those is currently on FMLA. We have 4 senior support specialists, and 1 is on medical leave as well. Our call center is supplied by vendors based on the number of buses they have per contract. So our vendors provide the staff for the call center. For this year, we have approximately 10 individuals that are in the call center, but we do have as many as 12 that are in the call center for additional support. Currently, we have a customer service coordinator position that is vacant and a new position that we added this year for special events and field trip coordinator. This is a slide that was previously shared with the board that gave the timeline for transportation and for transportation updates that started as of the fall of 2021. And so this just provided an opportunity for recap for what was expected in each one of the stages. Just a few areas to call out here in the timeline for transportation at that time. There was an interim director hired in August of 2021. That person served in the role essentially until June of 2022, this particular June, and then was no longer in the role. The advisory committee was established as well, and then there was an RFP for the yellow buses that started in November of 2021, and we ended with the update to Metro that actually occurred this past May. The other area to call out is the optimization study that was done in February of 2022, and we'll hear just a little bit more about that as we go through the other slides. So Alpha Route was the vendor that was selected to cover the optimization study. And essentially, as an organization, we were looking at how do we safely transport our students to school, maximize the routes that we have for our students in the way that is the most efficient, and how do we also look at cost savings if those do exist. So the Alpha Route solution was selected, and it proposed to save dollars by providing efficiencies in routing, proposed moving the walking distance at the bus stops to a half mile versus closer to the corner stops that the district had traditionally done. Proposed grouping stops to cut down on ride times. So again, the individual stops for each stop that's added, about 30 to 45 seconds is added to the overall bus ride. So the goal was to group the routes together so that there was not as much stopping along the way. Maximize the number of riders for each bus, and propose routing the buses through the city in the most efficient manner. So some challenges that were recognized prior to the opening of school, and I say prior to the opening of school because essentially this was about 2 days before school started, where we received some information that showed that there were many challenges with how the buses were routed and where we were going next. And these things included, instead of going through each one of them, but it did include one major area that we found is that the Alpha routing system used a different mapping system than we currently use as a part of the district. So the Alpha routing system used the Google Maps system, and as the district, we used the Hamilton County maps, which took into consideration all of the thoroughfares, the dead-end streets, the streets that were used as high traffic areas, so forth and so on. So there were 1,400 files that otherwise should have been able to update that had to be imported manually by the team. There were an additional 590 map points that also had to be manually updated. Versatrans is the company that we use to actually do the routing. The routing information is then uploaded into PowerSchool, which allows parents to access that information through the student information system, which is PowerSchool. There were multiple routes that required 3-point turns, buses that were routed to roads that were non-roads or private driveways. What we did find as a plus is the half-mile walk to stops was actually maximized. So the stops that were provided did offer the opportunity to maximize the amount of space, which was a plus on what was said would be done, but a minus on the other end because it was not traditionally something that parents had been accustomed to. There were also concerns where students were found routed on the wrong side of the road. And lastly, continuing to do some work with our non-public schools, quite a bit of inaccurate data from our charter schools and non-public schools and for routing purposes. And much of that had to do with addresses. I think that many of our schools have some of the same challenges that we have in terms of verifying addresses of students. And so that does cause a challenge in the system because the routes are done based on the addresses. So this just gives an example, just a picture example of where you see one that's a full thoroughfare and one where the bus was routed to a dead end. So our challenges continued. The Monday before school started, we had approximately 2,700 students that were 7th and 8th grade students that did not have a yellow bus assigned to them. We found that there was more inaccuracies in the file that had been provided to us by the state. There were where we would normally have 70 routes that were from our charters and non-pubs. Due to our House Bill 110, that was increased to 121 routes. We had 5 of our schools that provided information to us late that also needed buses. And then we changed the start time of schools for the healthy school start times, which caused the challenge with the routes as well, because the recommendation for the healthy school start times were done at a time when it was believed that the students would be riding the metro. And so therefore students were now riding yellow buses and then needed to be routed as a part of that. And as we continue, finding errors in bus routes, the 1.25 mile to 1 mile walk zone also caused challenges, because now we know that not only have we added 7th and 8th grade students, to the yellow buses, we have reduced the amount of the length of space that they would have to walk going to school, which means that there is more of a need for students that would need to be transported. Geography for our 7th and 8th grade students has also been a challenge, because our students, as we know, travel all across the district. And so in order to provide transportation for them, necessary that we're looking across the district as well. And as we continue to work with our charters, we are finding that we do have charters that have given us students that needed to be routed, that were actually routed, and then to find that they did not need services. So we're still continuing to clean up that data as well. One of our most recent challenges that we found, and it's continuing to manifest, and one of the things that I was really addressing prior to coming into this meeting as well, is the challenge now that the lack of receiving information early enough, the ripple effect that it's now had on other parts of the organization, specifically athletics. So prior to the conversation going into this year is that we would have 10 buses that would be held exclusively for athletics, which would avoid some of the need for routing that was happening during the school day or after the school day, so that it would give students a set number of buses that they would have for transportation. Finding that we had 2,700 students that did not have buses to get to school, with the need for still another 30 buses. Those 10 buses have gone into the overall number of buses, and therefore they are being used during the day to transport students to school. The challenge that it's causing is we run a full athletic for students across the district. In doing that, there are some stipulations that the drivers have as well. And so one of the stipulations that they have, just like we think about, those that are airplane pilots, there's a certain amount of time that they can actually drive a bus. They have concerns where there are some of them that are contracted to work the daytime, but they're not contracted to work the afternoon. So we've worked with our vendors to really do what I would call a puzzle piece effect, to looking at where buses are ending early, how we're doing the additional work to then pair them with other schools that need transportation, what that transportation looks like. It has been brought to my attention recently that working with the team, and we'll continue to do this, but there have been parents that have been asked to transport students to games that I was not aware of. Essentially, what was shared with me is that we were covering, even though we were doing it in a puzzle format. So not something as orderly and as organized that we would like, but we did want to make sure that it was equitable for families. Where we are right now is we really have to look at the challenges that we have and make some decisions when it also comes to athletics and what happens with athletics. So currently, challenges with athletics. There are a limited number of buses, as we've said from the beginning. And even in areas where they are able to get buses, then there's a challenge with drivers. So that would be one area. Currently, we have coverage mostly for high schools. Many of the junior high programs are being impacted, and we're very concerned as to what happens when we start with the elementary programs. Because that's another layer of what happens and how we work through it. Upcoming elementary and junior high athletic programs also pose challenges, as I've shared. We are working with all of the vendors for any buses that they have. We are currently utilizing vans as we have them as well. And we've also looked at private providers in terms of those that have vans or have chartered buses that we may be able to use to also provide additional services to the students. So some possible options for athletics that we are looking at as a team. We're adding this to our daily conversations that we're doing around actually athletic transportation. We're probably meeting about once every 2 or 3 hours. The athletics, we've not met as much. We've talked about it at least daily, but now we will add them to that continuum as well. One is reorganizing start times and dates of games. That's a possibility. The other is to increase the number of Saturday games. We have used some Saturday games in the past. That's one of the areas to possibly look at as well. The other that is not as popular, but is one that's being used in many of the counties that are around ours, is allowing families to transport students to and from games. The other is utilizing the tournament approach for elementary athletics, so where we bring several teams together at one time on a given day and allow them to play at one time together. And again, exploring the leasing of vans for staff that are able to drive them. So this would really require us making sure that this is something that we can do, but it is an area that we're exploring as well. Responding to families. So we sent the last update in terms of routing. That information went out over the weekend. The routes were updated on Saturday. We have not received at this point, and I knock on wood when I say this, we've not received a lot of concerns or feedback from the updates. There have been some isolated things that have been raised to us. Currently, as of yesterday, we had 213 tickets that were pending, and that's down from where we were at the end of the week because we ended the week with about 2,400. And so the update that we were able to do allow us to put those on hold because we identified that most of those tickets were for things like deviated routes, deviated stops, or for requesting stops that would take families back to the stop that they had last school year. We've learned a lot through the process, and we've dug in really, really deeply to really unpack not just where we are now, but really how we believe that we had got into some of the challenges that we were in earlier. We know that the pandemic is still affecting everything across the board, and one of those is the ability of the vendors to provide yellow bus services and the drivers to go along with it. In many instances, we have our vendors that can get buses, but they have challenges getting the drivers for the buses. The 7th and 8th graders, the yellow bus increase for the 7th and 8th graders actually was listed as an efficiency. However, it's something that's caused a challenge because the students were not actually routed to buses. And at the time that we were notified that they did not have a bus that they were routed to, we were in a mode of just trying to fix it, trying to make sure that we had students covered. The same, I think, is the looking at how we have done in the past routing students to get onto the buses. So we have used almost a curb-to-curb approach, even though our state guidance allows families to walk at least a half mile. We have done a curb-to-curb, and so families are still looking for that, and that is just not something that has been as feasible to go back to where we started. We have worked to improve communications by district and the schools, robocalls, texts, updates, giving information as we have that information available, and to keep parents abreast, and we have receive some positive feedback from that. We do need greater parent and student voice throughout the school year as it becomes relevant to the work that we're doing. So one of the main issues that I raised when it comes to the changing of the stops this year, while the changing of the stops did add to the efficiency in terms of the stops, it was not something that was communicated to families. So all they knew is they had a different stop. And for them, that meant that the transportation department had made another mistake. In all actuality, most of the bus locations were accurate, but it was not what they had been accustomed to before. And then, of course, we want to encourage families to continue to check Power School regularly because we are continuing to refine and make necessary updates. We are seeing continuous improvement. So where we started and where we are right now is not where we were at the beginning of the school year. It's not where we want to be, but we do want to see the continuous improvement. So our on-time arrival is hovering right around 71%. It continues to climb. We have GPS tracking for our buses. About 90% of them have the tracking as necessary, and so that's where we're getting the information from. So it's not just the reporting. It's coming from the actual tracking. We continue to review bus stops for safety and efficiency. We're doing that in a three-pronged approach, where that's coming from our bus driver, it's coming from our bus depot managers, as well as our transportation team. We're continuing to process alternative stops and deviated stops, and we're also we've added the process this year where that is not one where families have to print out the deviated stop request, but they are able to do it electronically, and we're able to follow up with that. So we've been able to do that within the last couple of weeks. We continue to listen to families. We're responsive to their questions. One of the challenges that we had early on is there was a concern from families because there were two things that were happening. One, their buses were coming late. Two, they weren't getting any communication about the buses coming late. And three, they were calling the call center, but they couldn't reach anyone or get any background information. So we really have worked through those things where we did put a process in where if a bus is up to 5 minutes late, we are sending robocalls to families. And so we saw that once we started that, immediately it stopped some of those calls that were coming to us. The second, because parents had noticed, so they weren't pleased that the buses were late, but they were pleased that they knew that the buses were going to be late. And then the follow-up through the offices to make sure that we're responding back to families. Next step. So what does success look like for us? We're continuing to remove students from buses who do not require service to allow the maximization of other routes. And this is really important because right now, all students that have said they needed transportation or all families that have said they needed transportation are included in the bus routes. So as we look at bus routes, at some of our bus stops, we may have one student that's being picked up at that stop, but other students are assigned to the actual stop. And so until we know that families don't need those stops, or until we do what's called a no-show process, i.e. these students have not reported to school, and that doesn't happen until the end of this week, we don't remove those students from the route. So as soon as parents that's where we are much better in that. And continue to work with our contractors as they hire, and that we were given to was about 2 weeks. Third week in September, October, it's a moving. I'm not able to give you when we're going. Frustrating, but that is the end. So what we also did, if this is of benefit, and I do want to preface this by saying this is and so the population of students that they serve is very different. Urban population of students, access to transportation is quite the same. So I want to preface it by saying that to start with. But the shortages for extracurricular activities, the shortages for transportation are across the country as we know. The shortages for extracurricular activities are across the country as well. And these are specific to extracurricular activities for those in a. And so just to share that, you know, we've seen a variety of things that other not offering after school the beginning of the which allows students to be taken home, offering the one-way, and then the other continue to trying to fill as we move. So I will stop there and open up for.
Thank you for all the work you and your
checked into sound.
Sure. What I can share with you, because we're 30, but at addition. What I can share is that we're at this point we're outside of just working with our local providers that are turning my head this way as I say that. But we are reaching out to our local vendors that not only also have chartered buses, just expressly for the purpose of athletics. So I would say at least by Monday.
To parents, I know parents are feeling a little frustrated in terms of the transparency of finding out that their child has been put on a bus that has double routes. How are you planning on handling that?
Yes. So one of the things that we identified as a challenge from the optimization study is that when it was done with the expectation that students would be having double routes. And that's not something that was shared as a part of that process. So when you go back to that information and talk to the team that worked through the process, that was a part of the plan early on, that the schools would, that the way that we were going to transport those additional 7th and 8th grade students were to do double routes. One was to do double routes. The other was to do shuttle routes. So where you would take a group of students to school, you would drop them off, and then you would go back and get another group of students. So we are continuing to look at the routes that we're taking, the number of students that are on the routes, taking the students off of the buses. We're working on the order of priority for the different routes is one, identifying routes that we don't need to start with and using those routes to cover schools that the students are getting to school late or they're being picked up late. So that would be the first priority. And then from there, we would look at double routes. And then from there, we would look at shuttle routes.
So will the parents be informed?
Be informed of whether or not of the changes in the routes.
If they're getting double routes.
What they would be informed about would be their actual route that they're riding. We have not looked at any notification in terms of them being on a double route or not. We've been more focused on trying to get the students to school, but I can talk to the team about that to see what information we can get to families.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member Weinberg, and thank you, Superintendent. Other board members have questions, comments? Mr. Morosky.
Thank you, President Lindy, and thank you for the update. As I said in audit committee last week, while the beginning of the school year has always been tumultuous regarding transportation, the 5 years I've been on the board, I can say with great certainty I've never seen this depth of information or understanding regarding what is going wrong, which gives me a tremendous amount of hope, which I'm not want to have, as people who know me know. So I have never seen this much information regarding transportation ever. So obviously a lot of things weren't going great. Some things have been put in place, and I would be remiss if I didn't, in honor of my esteemed colleague, Ms. Bolton, it's also an opinion I share, but to ask if in the list of things we're considering, and I kind of saw it alluded to maybe, of having not our own fleet, but maybe 10 buses. And Jen, I know I don't say that around Treasurer Wagner either, but is that part of the conversation? Or because I think when I hear the athletics, I'm like, oh, if we had these 10 buses just sitting around. So is that something?
Right. So I think it's something that we as a board and CEO team really have to explore collectively. Yeah. I think a part of my concern is, as my treasurer partner and I have talked about, it's when we look at organizations or contractors right now, that this is what they do for their day job, right? This is what they do full time. And with all of the perks that they can bring, with all of the experience that they can bring, they cannot hire enough bus drivers and get them trained and get them to locations. Yeah. For example, First Student is headquartered here. So they have a real desire. I know they've worked with us in the past. They have new leadership right now, but they have a real desire to work more intimately with us. They have given us the most in terms of additional services, but they still don't have enough to help us meet this need. So I think it's something that we really have to look at, whether or not overall, what is the return on investment? I would agree when I think about those 10 to 15 buses, but I think if we did have 10 or 15 buses sitting around right now and we had 30 or 40 routes that were not covered, we would be looking at using those buses to try to get our students to school during the daytime.
And there'd still be the challenge of having people to drive them. So,
right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Was there more? That's it. Dr. Moffitt.
So I think the work that that everyone has been doing, you all are super stressed. So I want to make sure that I say thanks to everyone in the building, the transportation team, especially, and all the other departments that have stepped up, because it's been pretty crazy. I do want to kind of stress communication. I think that this is, as a parent and as a parent of an athlete, of athletes, communication is superbly key. And I don't feel like our communication to parents and to the community has been what I would have wanted it to be. That's also been concurred with the communication that we've received from people that, I just didn't know. To make decisions in real time is tough, but I think the community will give us grace. Parents will give us grace if we communicate as we're making decisions rather than in hindsight of those decisions. So that is the one thing that I would just implore, that I think we need to really step up the communication to parents, to our non-public school partners who they don't have routes. And so that's been a continual challenge. But again, communication is just really, really paramount. And I just don't think that although we've had challenges with respect to staffing, the transportation person just got on and the chief operating officer just got on, but we have the ability to communicate more efficiently and better with our families and our students and our community. And I don't think that we're doing that very well. So I would really, really implore that when you make a decision, or as you're making decisions about athletics, that you pull in parents who are directly impacted by those decisions, and please don't make those decisions in a silo. There are parents who are taking off work. There are parents who are adjusting schedules so that they can carpool or so that they can get their kids in different places. And I just think we need to, if we can, be as considerate as possible for those decisions as well. I'm not going to ever be a fan of cutting athletics, or if we can have as little impact to our students as possible, so, because athletics is a way as a release for many of them. So whatever you can do, that's just my 2 minutes. Whatever you can do to try to make the impact to students as minimal as possible, I'd be super appreciative of that.
Thank you, Board Member Moffitt. To add a little more color to the conversation and the comment, I agree with you. I think that where we have been with communication, we have tried to be as proactive as we could, but also in a space where we could give information to families and not just give a rhetorical conversation. So, for example, the first update that we gave was on the 23rd for transportation and where we were. There are some, and I said this earlier, it's like there are some, for as many that want you to do it, are as many that want you not to. So it's like a plus if you do and a plus if you don't. It just depends on who's making the determination. So on the 23rd, we gave the update to try to let families know where we were with transportation. We didn't have any updates to provide. We didn't have any changes to provide after the 23rd until the 30th. So at that time, we gave an update where we were asking families to then do something different, where we were asking at that point, this is the survey that we have. This is the update that we have for the survey. We did do an interim in between the 23rd when we were able to get the 7th and 8th grade students on the buses. So we did an update then. So definitely open to continue to think through that process. For today, there were 3 sports teams that were impacted. And I think that that's the conversation around athletics right now that we want to continue working through. And the frustration, as I shared, that the team feels is the frustration that I feel as well. And my team is feeling the same frustration. Because as I've shared with my team, and I'll share with this entire group collectively, I am only as good as the truth that's provided to me. So once I'm giving information, I ask the questions, I follow up to get that information. I'm going to share with this body what is shared with me because I believe that that information is accurate. Today, there were 3 teams. 2 were from Walnut Hills and 1 was from Clark. 1 was a soccer team, 1 was a volleyball team, and 1 was a football team. At about 2:15 or 2:30, the team came in and said, we need to contact families and ask them to provide transportation for their students. I said, what time did the game start? The first game started at 3:15. So in talking to the team in that particular space, how do we contact families at this point, some of which have to reorganize, have to get off work, have to go and then make arrangements for their children? How do we contact them now and say that you have to go and pick up your child for a game? So I did make the determination at that point. If we can reschedule the game, is that something that we can do? I think the other side of that is because apparently this had already happened for some of those families before, they were already prepared to take the children. So it's one of those situations where moving forward, our goal is, I'm meeting with the team in the morning to look collectively at all of the games right now that may be a concern, because last week this wasn't shared with me when I shared it with the overall team. Looking across all of the teams, for all of the games that may be impacted, then pulling the athletic coordinators in to have conversation with them about those impacts and recommendations that they have, and then beginning to go to the families to get recommendations for them. So I received the feedback that's being provided right now, but I did want to give some background on how we got to that point. It wasn't just an arbitrary, very rarely am I just in a room making decisions.
Well, I just think, like I said, moving forward, this is an opportunity for us to, as a district, to improve our communication on all levels. Athletics is one area. The non-public school transportation is another area. And then communication with our students and our families internally is again, another area that we can do better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moffitt. Thank you, Superintendent. Mr. Craig?
So I first want to start by saying that I think this is always a challenge every start of a school year to get everything that we don't know to work in a way that we want it to work and in a way that it will make it work for everybody as best as possible. And so I think this has been a big challenge, but I appreciate you all working very hard. I know you had your staff, burning the candle on both ends there, right? Those first few days of the school year to make sure many of those challenges that we could deal with, we dealt with. I think I kind of have 2 questions, and they're really about how do we move, going forward. In our move forward. I think one of the stresses, and I think it's important for our public to know, that one of the stresses of our district is the shape of our district itself and the nature of how we transfer students across the district, whether there are students or whether they're students that go to non-public schools, we transport a lot of students a good amount of distance, and that creates longer bus routes. That creates more of a need to have a bus route. And so I think there is a appreciated need for an ongoing conversation about how does our district, as big as it is, manage having students transporting from one end of the district to the other. And so I think that's just a thing that we can constantly have that conversation going forward. It's not about making the decision for the parent. It's not about doing anything in that effect, but it's about recognizing that's a struggle. I think the other part, and I would be interested in just kind of hearing some of your opinion on this other part to it, is that some of the challenges also exist in how do we build that network next year to ensure that we have good timing to be able to make sure that everything is going to cycle, work in connection with each other. Because I think one of the things that we're learning from this year is that as we pull from one, it affects, as you pull from A, it affects B. As you pull from B, it affects C. You know, if you ask C to take a break, then A, it's and all those different types to that. And I think while that was a part of our transportation conversation over the last year or so, I think it's more apparent now that it needs to be more a part of that conversation. And so I was just curious as to kind of going forward and our projections into next year, what your thoughts are with regard to how do we bring those conversations into the room together and maybe have them all at once.
Yes. So a few different things come to mind in conversations and really going deep into the weeds on what's happened and how we've gotten here. So it's what my team has known me to call autopsy data at this point, you know, how we go back and look at the autopsy data. I think to your first point, we're going to have to make some real decisions around what we do in terms of start times and the populations of schools that start at what time. We have schools that start, right now, schools really organize where they're starting. So they start anywhere from 7:30 in the morning. We did the backup to 8:30 or 8:45, but that's across the district. So if now that we've put 7th and 8th grade students on the buses, if we're using the same population of buses to transport those students, we're setting ourselves up to start with because we know we have limited buses. So really looking at working with schools to stagger those start times so that it's staggered in a way that possibly is more geographic in nature than is all across the district in terms of the staggering. I think that that's one. Another, we've opened up the opportunity for families, for 7th and 8th grade families to ride the metro this year, but we didn't start the conversation there. There are about 500 families that have elected to ride metro instead of riding the yellow buses. So starting the conversation there next year, knowing that the capacity that Metro has right now for the 7th and 8th grade populations is just greater than ours when you're looking at going from one end of the city to the next. I think the third is a more broad conversation and a conversation that I think we're starting, but it's really going to take us some more work around. It's the open enrollment that we're doing for our 7th through 12th grade students across the district. Our students, because when you think about looking at, you have some select schools where students are going as magnet programs, and I'm using the magnet loosely, not necessarily magnet, but a select school where students go to. And then you have students that are in neighborhoods. Because we don't have any filter for what that looks like, we are not only trying to get students to school on a bus safely, but we're taking them, to your point, from one side of the city to the other. And they might be one of 3 children that are going from that side of the city to the other. And it's something that we're really going to need to look at. And I think the fourth is how we're providing services. Are we providing services in the way it may be something that's comfortable for us right now, but knowing the state of affairs right now across the country with transportation, do we have to take another look and a step back for what we provide? We're at 1 mile away. Do we have to go back to the 1.25 miles, which is still better than the state's requirement of 2 miles? And so really looking at some of those nuances as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think, again, the long-term solutions are out there. What we've been dealing with for the last 3 weeks are the here and now short term. And so I think once you're able to do that transition from that short term to that long term, that's where we will see the most benefit.
I agree. And I think the last thing I would add to that, having been an athlete as well. I won't say a full athlete, a partial athlete, but a mother of athletes, a principal that serves athletics, and a district leader that served athletics for a period of time. I think as a district, we were onto something really special to have a separate fleet just for athletics and activities. Because knowing the shortages across the country, being able to get back to having just that core group that's only responsible for this is something really positive. So if that's something that we're able to work our way back into and plan for, I do think it would be beneficial for our students.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Craig. Thank you, Superintendent. I'll close with just a couple thoughts and then a small number of questions. This just feels to me like one of those situations where multiple things can be true at once. And I think among them, this is genuinely really hard for a lot of parents. I think everybody up here gets that, either because your own kids are in that situation, or we've been hearing from parents, or our kids are in school with other kids who are in a similar situation, or to Mr. Craig's point, you've been working every possible minute of every possible day to try to make this better. So I don't think there's anybody up here who doesn't feel in a real sense that this matters, this is hard, this is important. It's why we're spending more time on this topic tonight than anything else we're talking about. And so for anybody listening, I think just to acknowledge this is not hitting everybody in the district, but where it is, it's a big deal. I think the other thing that can be true at exactly the same time is to echo some of my colleagues here. A year ago, we were talking about what an enormous challenge it was figuring out our new situation with Metro. I think the word Metro has come up fewer than 5 times in the last 45 minutes. And I think we should not miss that fact, because I don't think that happened by accident. That happened because of a lot of hard work from our leader, from our board, from Metro, from the city. And so I think it's important that multiple things can be true at once. This is a serious issue for a lot of families, and there's been some significant movement on major parts of our transportation landscape over the course of the last year. The other thing, and I appreciate Mr. Morosky saying this, there's no question in my mind that our administration is taking this extremely seriously and has a commitment to honesty about what the issues are, where they came from, how we're doing. There's no question in my mind that people are confronting this with courage and hard work and transparency. That's what I hope for from our school district, that we are honest about the things that are hard, that we go after them together, and we figure them out. And I think it's important that we be honest with everyone about what the timeline for improvement may look like. It sounds like, to your point, Superintendent, the biggest outstanding issue is the hiring of more drivers. We will do everything we can, and there is that's going to be hard. And so I think I just say that I think multiple things can be true, and I think our board and our administration's commitment to things like honesty, courage, hard work, transparency are important, and I appreciate that. The small number of questions I have are things like, I know you said 71% on-time arrival. I know that's up from where we were, and so we're moving in the right direction. In my mind, there's a big difference between being 5 minutes late and being an hour late. Can you create any visibility for us into, like, of that 29%? Is this way late a lot of time, or is it most of it just by, do we not know? Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Sure. So we do on-time arrival that starts after 5 minutes. So if it's within a 0 to 5 minute window, it's considered on time, which is the same way that it's done on Metro. So we use the same kind of metrics. I look at the data every day. It gets populated for me at 10:25 every day. So I review it every single day at 10:25. And so what we find within that, it really ranges, honestly, from about a 6 minute window to about a 17-minute window. We have, I believe there are 7 schools where it was a little closer to 30 minutes that they were getting to school late. And those 7 schools were identified. We've worked with those school leaders around that. We have been able to reduce a couple of those because we've been able to modify routes in other places, but we still have about 6 or 7 that are still right around up almost at that 30-minute window that they're getting there late. I can give the specifics for that. If you would like that, I can pull that specifically as well.
No, I'm just thinking as we go forward, I know this is one of our top 5 priorities between now and November 8th. I'm just wondering if and I'm open to other ideas on this, but it might be something we could find some way to talk about in our meetings, like how many kids are so late that it really is going to impact what's going on. And again, I'm open to other ideas people have on that front. I think one other question I wanted to ask was, is there anything the board is not doing to be helpful on this front that we could be? For example, I know we increased the pay for crossing guards to try to get more crossing guards. Is there anything we can do around bus driver comp that would make a difference? Is there any ESSER money we haven't used that we could use for vans or for, I liked your idea about charter buses. And this is not something we could do forever, but if we do have an acute need, is there something else we could be doing?
So we are meeting in the morning, actually, with the contractor that is providing the most service to us at this point. We have a meeting with them in the morning to ask just those questions. We have just to see if there's anything else as an organization that we can help them do to get additional drivers. For example, in the next few weeks, we have an additional hiring fair coming up. We've added crossing guards as something that we're going to promote as a part of that need. We want to do the same thing for bus drivers. So if we can actually have them to come and be a part of our hiring fair, that's one area. We will ask those questions. What we are finding is what the contractors have shared with us, honestly, is those that have the credentials to drive. So, the actually having their CDL so that they can drive the buses, and then they meet all of the other requirements in terms of that. So if there's something else that comes out of that, we'll definitely share it with the team. I do believe collectively, the board has been very supportive and willing to help in any way that we possibly can. And if there are other suggestions that come out of that conversation, I'll definitely share those with you and the board.
That's great. And then the very last thing was, I know one question that's come up, parents have gotten this offer to ride Metro, if that's a better fit given the particular challenges around Yellow Bus. One question that comes up sometimes, and if you answered this in the presentation, you skip the question, but sometimes folks will ask, can I do that just until the problem is fixed and can then go back to Yellow Bus? Can you talk about that?
I can. So they can do it until the problem is fixed, but we would ask them to do it until the end of the semester. And the reason is because once we make the change and remove them from the bus, it changes everything about the route. Anytime we change the route, it adds 30 to 45 seconds to that route. So when we add a student to a route, it really because of the way, again, that we do our routing, it adds additional time to the route. So it gives us more time to prepare. We can do it in an analytics format versus making it live, so we can anticipate what the change is going to be versus saying, yes, you've done it for this quarter, now we're ready to start back just as we get stabilized. So we really do need an opportunity to stabilize overall, and moving back and forth does not give us an opportunity to do that. So yes, they can go back, but we would ask that they do that at least at the end of the semester.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments on transportation before we move on to our next item? Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, board members. I'd like to ask if board members would support switching the order of the 2 items we have left. The 2 items we have are the state graduation requirement update, and then some updates, reminders, and any questions board members have for the Council of Great City Schools. We happen to have our coaching team available here at the hour. And so if there are no objections, I would propose that we just reverse that order. Any concerns? Okay, great. Rob, do we have Cindy and maybe some other folks from the council who are online? Great. We would love to welcome him in. And we're a minute early, so we might. Dr. Moffett.
How long is the graduation presentation?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, Superintendent. How long is the graduation requirement presentation?
I would say 15 minutes. 20.
Okay, I was just asking because if they're not all here, rather than wait, we could just.
I think it's a good suggestion. Let's see. Rob, do you have Cindy? Yeah, she told me the same thing. Why don't we, since we're waiting on Cindy, why don't we go ahead and do our graduation update, Superintendent? And then we'll go and pick up the council when we finish.
Okay, so I want to first pass along this is actually from the Ohio website. The presentation, for the most part, comes from the Ohio website as well, and then I will send the slides that I'm going to cover. So I'll send that to you now. Okay. All right, I didn't get that out, so let me do that again. All right, so this presentation actually covers the updates for graduation cohort for this school year. This starts with the graduation criteria for the cohort of 2022, but the changes are for this year's cohort, which is cohort 2023. So I did want to share both sets of information with you and open up for any questions that you have around this as well. So I want to just take 1 second, get this over to Rob. I saved it, but it didn't save. Oh, there it is. Okay. The initial information was shared at the last CAL presentation that we had. All right. And Rob, you should have it now. I just said it. Okay, I was just sitting that one to the board too. Oh, okay. All right, so wanted to start with our overall graduation requirements. I shared the flyer that is on the Ohio site. We also have it linked in this presentation as well. So there are the long-term graduation requirements have changed as of 2019. That would start with this year's graduates. So students that started in this particular cohort, we know that the cohort year starts when the student enters the 9th grade. So that would be when our current 12th grade students entered the 9th grade, which would have been 2019. There are 3 areas that are now required as a part of graduation. 1 is course requirements on the next slide. 2 is demonstration of competency. And then 3 is readiness. And we're going to keep moving, Rob. Okay. So there has been a change in the competency criteria for our students. Previously, students had to pass English Language Arts 1 and 2. There's been a change for this cohort. So they have to pass Algebra 1 and English Language Arts 2. And for most of our students, they take Algebra 1 in the 9th grade. If they take it as an 8th grade student and they pass the end of course exam, it does give them the credit for that. And for our English Language Arts 2, that's a 10th grade course. So students take Algebra 1 and English Language Arts for 10th grade, and that's where they do the demonstration of competency. The other scores are for our alternative assessment. So that just gives you the same, they still have to pass math and language arts, but it's for our alternative assessment students. There are alternatives to the competency to passing the exams. So essentially, if students pass when they take the exam in 9th grade or 10th grade and they pass it, they have met the competency criteria. If they do not, they do have an opportunity for intervention, up to at least 2 interventions, and then they're eligible to pass the competency space in one of the other 4 areas. And that includes college credit plus, which is our dual enrollment, military enlistment, career readiness, or ACT or SAT, an ACT or SAT remediation free score. So essentially, and not to cover all of them, but just to cover as an overview, the demonstration for career readiness means that they have to complete 2 demonstrations to show competency. One must be in the foundational area, and one can be in the other area, which is the supporting demonstration. And you see that those include, really in the foundational area for career readiness, it includes passing an industry certification exam. It includes passing, going through a registered apprenticeship program. It also includes earning a competency score on a WebEx exam as well. So one of those areas has to be passed, and one can be passed in the supporting demonstration, which includes 250 hours of work-based learning or workforce readiness on work keys, which is also passing an assessment, or earning the Ohio Means Job Readiness Seal. We can go to the next. So the third area, so if students pass the first, the Algebra 1 and English Language Arts 2, they're done with 1 and 2, but they still have to pass an area in 3, all right? So in 3, there are 12 options for diploma seals. Of the 2 seals, one of them has to be a state-defined seal. There are 9 state-defined seals and 3 local-defined seals, and the seals are actually affixed to their diploma or transcript. I will give an overview in two of the seals. I just wanted you to see what all of the seals look like. And so this is the actual seal that would show up on the student's diploma and transcript. So the first, and I covered the ones that would cover science and citizenship, but there is the same breakdown for the other 7 seals that exist, for the other seals that exist as well. And so for one of the things that I did want to point out for science is, for the most part, it is students, they have to take and pass a particular test or take and pass a particular class. So for this one, for example, I highlighted that if they earn a final grade of B or higher in an advanced science course. So we have courses specifically from the state of Ohio that are considered advanced courses. And if they earn a B or higher there, that will give them a competency for the science seal. For citizenship, this also requires passing an assessment or passing a course. Sometimes we think about it a little bit differently when we think about citizenship, but this is one of the areas that is included. So a B or higher in American history or American government, as well as passing the advanced placement test or getting a 3 on the Ohio State test. The assessments are called out here, science and social studies, because the students take the assessment, but the only ones that are gateway courses, i.e. they have to pass them for graduation, are Algebra 1 and English 2. So our preliminary cohort data, we shared this information earlier, and this is where we are as of September the 6th, and this is for our cohort that just graduated. Any data, we know that next week report card scores are, we understand that they should be released next Wednesday, and the data that would be released for graduation rate is always a year removed. So next year, we will see the information for the 22 cohort. The following year, we will see the information for the 23 cohort. So we've ended, even though there are some appeals that will go through October, we essentially ended the cohort with 2,299 students. Of those already, we have 1,845 confirmed graduates. In terms of intervention, there were 1,757 that were expected to graduate with additional intervention, and we actually graduated 90 over that number with intervention as well. And then there are 157 students that would be needed to meet the 87% goal for graduation. So right now, where we are with just these numbers, it's right around an 80% rate. For where this graduation cohort would be for 22. So just giving you just some overview of the factors and what's included here. The graduation submission window closes for ODE on October the 13th. So when we're talking about appeals, we have through October the 28th to actually make those appeals for students that could have graduated with some other criteria. Talked earlier about the remediation-free score for ACT or SAT. We as a district have to make a determination each year as to whether or not we are offering to students ACT or SAT. Even those students can take either. And if they get a remediation-free score that will qualify for them for graduation, we offer ACT for our students. And the scores are listed in what the overall scores need to be for them for it to be remediation-free. Cohort breakdown, the one thing to call out here is that we have 340 students that are still under graduation pathway review. So when we talk about appeals, these are students that we're going through their information, making sure that all of the information that we have for them is accurate and current. So we may be able to get to a few more graduates through this 340. For our cohort for 2023, and all we have right now and all that we're sharing at this point is where we are just based on students that are in this graduation cohort that have met the competency level first. So not looking at any of the other seals or any of the other criteria. And this is one that I really wanted to make sure that we pay some close attention to, because right now the cohort is 2,414 students. And of those 2,414 students, a little over 1,400 of them have already passed Algebra 1 and math, Algebra 1 and English 2. So that says we have a lot of work to do, because we know that we'll get more students graduated, but the more that we can graduate in the competency space, the less they have to do on the other end. So, this is what we really want to focus on as we start thinking about the conversations that we've had, for example, around Algebra 1. One of the reasons that is a lever as we think about how we're looking at student achievement is because the more students that we can get to pass Algebra 1 as a 9th grade student, the fewer of them we're concerned about them graduating on time because they've not passed Algebra 1. So for the components, we know the state has gone from an A to F system to a 5-star system. However, less than 84% for graduation is 1 star. Up to 84% is 2 stars. Up to 90% is 3 stars. 93.5 is 4 stars. And over greater than or equal to 96.5 is 5 stars. So just thinking about just in that component where we're looking at how we're working with our students and meeting the expectations. I wanted to add in this information, and I saw it somewhere, and I think it was from Board President Lindy. I don't recall where the question came from, but earlier, a few weeks ago, there was an article that was put out about where we were in terms of performance for the number of students that were in AP courses or our college credit plus courses. And so what I wanted to do is make sure that we identified kind of where we are now compared to where we were last year this time. I will share that this is the beginning of the school year, so schedules are still being finalized. But the advantage here, and on the next slide, I'm going to talk about pass rates. But the advantage here is we want to make sure that our students have as much exposure as possible to higher level courses and higher level coursework. And so the difference, of course, in the advanced placement course and the College Credit Plus course is at the end of the advanced placement course, in order for them to get credit for the class, in order for them to get the college credit for the class, they have to pass the AP exam with a 3 or higher. Most institutions are still accepting the 3. Some have moved up to accepting the 4 or higher. And then the College Credit Plus, they pass the course. So they work with credentialed schools, with credentialed teachers that's done with us through one of our university or college partners, and then they pass the class and they get the credit for the class. So these are our AP scores, and this is actually for last school year. So what you see in the first column is by high school, the number of exams that were taken. So it's not broken out by the type of exam it was, it's just the exam. So this is the number of exams that's offered in the school. The other thing that this chart does not qualify for is the number of students that this accounts for. So you can have one student that takes 3 or 4 exams. This is just looking at the number of exams that were offered. And then in the last column, you see the pass rate. Passing on an AP exam is considered 3 or higher. And so you see the percentages that we have. So across the district, we're at a 63% pass rate. But I think one of our next conversations, when there is additional time, one of our next conversations is really to talk about, as we think about positive outcomes for students, how we're looking at improving these rates. So if the students are taking the courses, we also want them we want to improve the pass rate in the courses. One of the areas that I applaud the district for is, if you'll notice, pretty much all of our high schools are accounted for when it comes to AP coursework. And one of the things that the district did previous to me, the district has started doing this already. I believe it was about the second year of doing this. But the district we currently have a cadre of AP teachers that teach the AP courses across schools. So therefore, it gives students the opportunity, regardless of the school they're in, to have access to AP courses. Yes, we would like to build that coursework in individual schools, but increasing the access across the district is very positive. So making sure that we have those resources for students. And this is our College Credit Plus, and this is the number of students that earn the credit in College Credit Plus. And so the first chart showed the number of students that were in the class. And Rob, if you'll just flip back for me to that first chart that showed AP and CCP. Right there. So for our College Credit Plus, we see that we had 823 students that were enrolled. So in the last set of columns, back where you were. Thank you. We see in the column number of students enrolled at least one CCP course. There were 823 students that were enrolled. Now we can go forward. And there were 604 of them that actually earned the credit. So there's also some space and opportunity for improvement in this space, because if the course does not require the students to take a separate exam to get the class, to get the credit, it means that they have to pass the class. And that's no different than passing one of their classes that they're sitting in high school. So how we really work with our students, monitor them, and support them through making sure that they're passing the courses. So next steps, the link to the overview is just this document. So it's the document that's also that's on the Ohio site, but it just gives the graduation criteria and requirements. You know, I know that our counselors have worked really hard with students to make sure that they are clear on what this information is, but I do believe that we want to do a relaunch with ensuring that our students and our families are aware of what the expectations are for graduation for this cohort prior to the end of the school year. I am not suggesting that it did not happen previously, but this is our first year, knock on wood, that we are all back, and hopefully we remain back for the entire school year. So really making sure that we re-engage families around that. So our next steps are a relaunch for all schools on the new graduation requirements. These are the expectations moving forward. So we want to make sure that all students are familiar with those. Graduation audits for all schools with next steps. So it's two things with audits: individual student audits, i.e. what does this child need in order for them to graduate on time with their classmates in May. For a graduation audit for all the school is where is the school collectively with the percentage of their students that are on track to graduate and to graduate on time. And the second, all of our high schools, in person and virtual. So where each school is hosting their parent night with their families to make sure that there's clarity around the expectation, graduation requirements, so that parents can touch it, can ask questions about it, so that we make sure that we're getting more of our students across the stage on time.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Wright. If we could do some questions or comments quickly, so that we can flip over while we have our guests. Mr. Morosky?
Thank you, President Lindy. Of the 3 local design seals, I just need a reminder. Do we offer all 3?
We do.
Okay.
And the last set, the one that we're looking at currently that we need to review is the seal that is for student participation. It's called something different, but it's the activity engagement. So one of the things in looking at what was approved last year, I just want to make sure that we're including all of the possible required opportunities for students. So we're reviewing that and we'll likely be making some requests to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Other comments, questions? Dr. Moffitt?
We previously had a volunteer requirement for the district. They had so many volunteer hours. Is that still applicable?
It is. It's a part of that 50-hour requirement.
Okay.
One of the things that we're working on is making sure that we have a streamlined way to monitor that because it's been monitored individually at individual schools.
Right.
So we're working through that process.
But there is that requirement still.
There is the expectation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moffitt. Other questions? I'd just like to say that I found this fascinating in the data on our high school students, particularly around AP number of courses taken, college credit plus taken, and then credit earned. I wish that Vice President Jones were here because she has asked about that data many times. My only request was, can you please send a copy to her? Because I think she'd find that very, very, very interesting.
Great.
Yeah.
And if opportunity presents, maybe at the next hour, we can open up and do additional questions around it.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to keep on moving. We're on item number 3. Rob, if you could bring in Cindy, please. Sounds great. Hello, Cindy.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. For folks who are tuning in, our board starting some months ago, more than 2 and less than 8, I can't totally remember. We started working with the Council of Great City Schools on a governance coaching endeavor. And so we had a 2-day kickoff training with them, and they have been joining some of our board members' board meetings to offer feedback and also lay out some next steps in the process that we're working on together. So we're excited to have them back this afternoon for some updates.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. We're in the process of having board members submit some draft goals and guardrails based on some of the information that was shared by Alma back when you did the board did the superintendent search, using some of that community feedback side by side with the superintendent's student performance data that was shared last week, and asked board members to submit 1 to 5 draft goals, and 1 to 5 draft guardrails, and that's to set us up so that we can hit the ground running on the 12th to start coming together as full board and superintendent team to work on narrowing down to a set of draft goals and guardrails to take back out to the community. So we've received submissions from most of the board. I'm going to encourage everyone just to revisit those and make sure that the goals you have written are about student outcomes. And when we talk about student outcomes, it's about what students know or are able to do. And just revisit those and make sure that is that your goals actually are qualify through that lens, and then that they be written in SMART goal format so that they have the various components: a population, beginning date, ending date, starting point or baseline, which if you can't figure out what that is, it's fine to put X, and an ending target, percentage or measure. Again, that can just be Y for the purpose of the goal writing, and then also the instrument by which it would be measured. For example, the Ohio State test or whatever applicable measure there would be. And where the team can also be reaching out and giving feedback and on those goals and guardrails that have been submitted. So that's the first part. The second part is the process of designing the community outreach and engagement sessions is underway. And so the board has been provided with an engagement and outreach list where you can begin signing up, and the instructions have been sent out for that. If there are any questions about that, or you need any assistance, or don't have access to that document, please let me know. And then that process will continue through, I believe, the 14th is deadline for that initial sign up, so the board can continue scheduling and getting word out about that process and be ready to do the engagement and outreach once the goals and guardrails are drafted.
Thank you, Cindy. Do board members have, did I interrupt you? Did you have more you were going to share?
I'm finished. No, thank you. Questions are great.
Part of the goal of this time too was to have a time for board members to ask any questions they had. There have been a number of emails that have come out, whether it's about drafting the goals and guardrails or signing up for community engagement and outreach. If people don't have any questions, that's fine. But if people do want to use this time to get clarity on anything, including the superintendent or the treasurer, that's what this time is here for. Okay, I'll ask 2 questions, and then if that's it, we can move on. I think one was on the community engagement and outreach. Cindy, I saw a piece about you always send 2 board members, and we should do at least one with each of our colleagues. Did I read that right?
Yeah, yes, you did read that correctly. We encourage everyone to get out with. Yes, it needs 2 board members because one would need to be the primary facilitator, the other would be taking notes and assisting and making sure that those notes are submitted. And then we definitely recommend everyone rotating so that you're each serving to facilitate with each of your board colleagues. The other thing we recommend is that board members sign up for things that are outside of their usual networks or areas of representation, so that you're hearing from those who you might not always hear from. So it gives board members an opportunity to hear different voices than what they might be used to hearing. And then we also encourage, I don't think it was in the instructions, but we also encourage board members to sign up as board member 1 for some things and board member 2 for another, so that there's the ability to complete and to participate in the 2 different roles.
That's great. And it was taking me a second to figure this out, but if I'm supposed to do one with each of my colleagues, that means I should sign up for 6 different items.
If possible, yeah. Yes.
Great. So I was going to ask everybody, if you signed up for 3 or you signed up for 2, if you could look to find a total of 6, that would create a way for each of us to have a chance to do this with each individual board member. Great. And then the only one question I had was, can you say just a little bit, Cindy, about, people either have spent time writing draft goals and draft guardrails, or if they haven't yet, they will. Can you say just a second or 2 about how we'll use those when we get to the 12th?
Yeah. So when we come together on the 12th, normally when we do a retreat or a work session to start drafting goals and guardrails, that would be the first portion of our time together, would be for individuals to take some time during that session to draft goals and guardrails on their own. So because of the because of the way that we're scheduling the sessions and dividing it up between a couple different days and maybe a little less time than what is ideal, we're having the board individually write their draft goals and guardrails on their own, so that when we come together, we'll pair you up with a colleague to go through your goals together. We'll start with goals likely, and come to consensus on where you agree with, you might find that there are goals that you have like goals or very different goals, and you'll have opportunity to explain to each other and then come to consensus on what you think the top goals are. And we'll continue through the process until there is a set of 1 to 5 goals and guardrails that the governing team agrees on to take out community. So what you're doing on your own gets through one step of the process that we would normally do together.
That's great. Thank you, Cindy. And I appreciate everybody's time, both our guests and my colleagues. If people don't have any other questions, we can keep moving. But last call, any questions for our friends from the council? Seems like we're in good shape. Cindy, thank you. We appreciate it. And we will see you on Monday.
That's great. And we're always available by email or phone as well if something comes up for anybody.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone, we are moving towards the end here. So we have finished everything we planned on doing tonight. We just had a placeholder if anybody had any additional questions they wanted to ask of our administration on any topic. Mrs. Weinberg.
I have a couple of questions. Drum roll. No. 2 questions. Let me get my little piece of paper out here. Say it again.
We've received multiple requests for there to be time for people to ask about questions. We have created time for, and you don't have to use it, but it is available for those who would like to.
I will be quick. Superintendent Wright, 2 things. One, can you just give us an update on athletic trainers? And then also an update on how you wanted to give us the information regarding COVID numbers and the protocols.
Sure. So in terms of athletic trainers, we have postings available for athletic trainers. We're covering right now with the existing trainers that we have to support schools, but we've not hired additional athletic trainers at this point. We did receive an email just yesterday from the Ohio Association that covers athletic trainers, and so we've done some reach out to see if they have additional resources that are available for us, but we don't. That's all of the update that we have at this point. In terms of the COVID numbers, in the weekly email that I send to the board, I've left the COVID link there as a standard location. The COVID numbers exist live on our website. So if we go to the bottom of our website and click COVID, on that page, the numbers are current and updated. And I will share that as of today, when I looked at them this morning, the Hamilton County was now low. So we know that it goes up and down in terms of that, but right now it's low. So the link is there and available.
One more comment. Can I go ahead? Okay, so going back to regarding the athletic trainers, I know that a couple of board members had questions on it. I know that you said that you have postings available, but I think the question, or we wanted an update on regarding if their athletic teams would be affected due to the fact of not having the trainers. Would they not be able to participate, or can you elaborate on that?
Sure, they can still participate. We have prioritized the more high contact sports for the students to have trainers. So they can still participate. It doesn't stop them from participating, but we want to make sure that all of the teams have access to the trainers. So we're continuing to work to recruit.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg.
I think I'm done.
And even if you're not, it's okay. Anything
I'm going to
else?
look at Brandon. Brandon, what do you think? Should I ask one more question? Okay.
I have a question.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Dr. Moffitt.
So can you share either Superintendent Wright or Treasurer Wagner about the impact that transportation is having on our budget. My questions are regarding budget. So I'd like to know, are we having to spend more money outside of what we've already approved? What is the impact of transportation on our budget? And then I do have another question after that.
So I'll start, and then I'll I think go over to our treasurer. So right now, so there is a pro and a con to where we are right now. I think the con, of course, is a con, and that is we don't have enough buses across the board. So as a result of that, the providers have given us the buses that they told us that they would provide. It's the fact that we needed additional buses that will change the $500,000 that we thought would be saved by going the optimization route. In terms of the invoicing, we have not received updated invoicing at this point. We're really trying to get to some level of stabilizing so that we will know collectively how that's going to be impacted so that we're able to bring it back to the board directly. We do expect an impact. At this point, we don't expect that it would go beyond the savings that we thought that we would have from what the optimization study gave us.
So if we've got approximately 500 students that are in the 7th and 8th grade that are now taking the Metro, that has to be, there's a cost associated with that we had not anticipated. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that cost is that number times 315, but the reason that there is an offset is because we don't have the buses that would be necessary to cover the other end of that in terms of transportation. So when we think about just the number of buses that we need, the providers provided what it was that we asked for, but what we asked for was not enough to cover our need. So right now, those students would then go to Metro at that $315 rate, which honestly is less expensive than we pay for the yellow bus services that we get per student.
Okay. Did you have anything to add on that one, Ben?
I don't have any. I was waiting for all the routes and everything to settle, all the data to settle out, so they can just reevaluate where they stand against the budget. And so I'm still, they're in progress. So I think we're covered.
Okay. And then my next question is regarding, in order to, it's the budget impact on covering classes. So we were able to use, and I want to understand this. In order to get to our number of core classes covered, we are adjusting teachers that were in specialty courses or teaching specialty classes to cover the core classes. Am I right on that part so far?
So they weren't in classes. So the people that we've adjusted were fully released teachers that were supporting other teachers. They were not servicing students directly. So we adjusted them from doing that particular role where they were servicing the adults to actually teaching in classroom.
And so in servicing the adults in their previous assignments, how was that being funded?
So it depended, I think, and I saw the breakdown that Jen actually sent earlier. There were some that were general funded, and there were some that were title funded, and there was a population that was ESSER funded as well.
So in doing that, with the various funding measures, and we're going to talk about ESSER tomorrow, so hopefully everybody will tune in. But I got to give a plug to Jen over there. But I'm assuming that would be a temporary fix to cover core classes. Is that correct?
Until we can find staff. As temporary as we can make it. Two things. So one, in terms of finding staff. So one is until we can find staff, i.e. we're able to hire individuals to go into those positions. The second, we are getting ready to go through the allocation process or review of the allocation process, which happens at the beginning of the school year. After we go through enrollment, we look at each individual school to see whether or not their number of teachers is justified by their enrollment. And if it's not, then we do reorganization from there.
Okay. So I guess my concern from a lay person standpoint, although I understand exactly what you're talking about, but there have been some questions. And so I wanted this answer in a lay term. Is there a possibility that there could be a shortage because we're taking from one pot, and to use Brandon's example, we're pulling from one area and then that push has to be offset in another place. So if this is a temporary position, is there a possibility that this could change later where we would be at a deficit for core courses and the funding of that? How is that impacted?
So what's happening is there are core budgeted positions that were vacant. And they took a staff member that was funded by Title I and put them in the core classroom to fill that vacancy. So they're both budgeted positions. We just took a body and took it out of one funding position and put it into the other. So that the only shortage would be is if we had significantly higher enrollment than we had budgeted for, and then we would have to hire extra staff. So this process that we go through at the beginning of September, so the budgets are all built on projected enrollment, right? And then in the beginning of September, we right-size to the actual enrollment, so that all the children show up where we anticipated, and then we adjust staff based on the collective bargaining class size ratios. So going back to that person that was title funded is no longer title funded. That budget for the title funded position is still sitting there. And if they are able to find somebody to permanently fill that spot, that reading specialists go back to the title funded spot and fill that role. So our title funding is a little bit underspent right now because of that.
I got you. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thanks, Dr. Moffett. Last call for the board members. Having no other discussion before us, declare our committee meeting adjourned. Thank you. Have a good evening.